This question is to all the candidates. What is your opinion of coalitions as a government structure, and do you consider them undemocratic?
I think that we can certainly see from the United Kingdom that in a Westminster system of government and parliamentary democracy around the world, we're a constitutional monarchy. We do not directly elect a prime minister, so there's nothing about choosing to move to a coalition route that's anti-democratic. It's part and parcel of our parliamentary traditions. And as such, I think that my preference is to find more cooperation in the House of Commons. I think all MPs should cooperate. I experienced that myself when I worked in government in the 1980s. I was senior policy advisor to the Federal Minister of Environment in a progressive conservative government. We didn't take a step that we didn't check our plans with the NDP environment critic and the Liberal environment critic. We were cooperative as a normal way of doing business on Parliament Hill. We need to bring that back. We can have cooperation around certain issues, or we can have a formal coalition. But formal coalitions are certainly a legitimate and appropriate method of government when the result of an election is a minority parliament. Thank you.
How many people, just by a show of applause, are not worried about a coalition government that is not entering into the decision-making process? Let me ask you another question. Does it offend you when you hear criticism of that move? Okay, here we go with our next round of questions, a minute and a half each of you. What is your point of view on the Indian Act and Indian affairs?
Thank you. It's an excellent question. You'll find that all our policies are on the website, so this is the official Green Party policy, is that we find that the Indian Act has been a failure. And if in accordance with the wishes of First Nations people, we want the phased elimination of the Indian Act phased in so that we can actually move to what we should have been doing since 1996 when the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Affairs reported, we should be implementing those recommendations for nation-to-nation negotiation for the resolution of outstanding issues. We have a complete scandal in this country with an absence of safe drinking water in First Nations communities, inadequate education, far below standard housing. We also have a land titles process which, as described and when working as described, ends in the extinguishment of title, which is an offense under United Nations law for the respect of Indigenous rights. So our system has failed in terms of the evidence of how First Nations people are living in communities. The Indian Act itself was used as the model for apartheid in South Africa. We need to make substantial changes. I'm proud to have met with and discussed these issues with Grand Chief Sean Atleo of the Assembly of First Nations. We need to make this a priority for Canada. I bemoan the fact that the opportunity of the Kelowna Accord, which had all provinces and federal government agreeing back in 2005, was lost. We need to restart it.
This question, we'll start with Elizabeth on this one. It's on transit. What are your views on rail transit up island and on the peninsula? Bus transit is infrequent and limited. And the writer of this question says there was a senior who gave up her car for environmental and health reasons, and she needs public transit. This is a big question across the entire capital region right now. Elizabeth.
Yes, and when we attended our local sessions for how to meet the provincial targets for greenhouse gas reductions, it was very obvious that our number one source of greenhouse gases is transit. In Sydney, I think it's about 70%, the same for central Saanich. And of course, it's because we have a very weak mass transit system. If it had been up to me, we would have much rather seen the money spent on the McTavish Road interchange spent on improving our mass transit system, improve speedier bus lanes, potentially light rail, which I'm very excited about light rail, because light rail is a magnet for investment. It brings in retail businesses. It brings in a pedestrian community that actually attracts investment. So that would be a preference. The Island Railway definitely needs investment. We've got to protect the rail link on the bridge. These are municipal questions. The role of the federal government is to make sure there's stable, secure, long-term financing for municipalities, because out of every dollar collected in taxes from municipal, provincial, federal, but there's only one taxpayer, out of every dollar, municipalities get 8 cents. It's not enough to be looking after our transit needs, our waterwork needs, our recreational uses. Municipalities need stable funding, and I will work very hard to make sure that our region, that southern Vancouver Island, particularly the peninsula, gets better mass transit service going in whichever direction the local municipalities prefer.